Hello, everyone. I'm talking today about macros and specifically how to master your macros. If you are someone who wants to have a bit more control over your nutrition in terms of your goals, then macros are really key. You might have heard the term macros before. You might have heard people talking about counting or tracking macros. But if you've never really understood how or why, or maybe you've got a bit of a vague understanding, but you want to know how to master it, then you're in the right place. So I'm going to go through a few things today. I'm going to start out with the what, because for some of you, you might not even know what a macro is. You might have heard the term, but you're not exactly sure what that means. So I'm going to go through what exactly it means. I'm going to go through why they're important, why you'd even bother learning about it, and also how to do it, the kind of crucial how to implement part as well. It's a subject I feel very passionately about. I think everyone should know and understand about macros. I actually think they should teach it in schools, because if you want to be able to make informed choices about your nutrition, this can be a real game changer. I think if we all had a good understanding of macros, there'd be a lot less confusion, less overwhelm, less frustration when it comes to our nutrition choices and how to optimize our body composition. Whether your goal is to lose fat, to gain muscle, to improve your overall health, macros can be a real game changer. I believe it's the greatest diet or nutrition hack of all time. I'd even go so far to say that when done correctly, I've never seen macro counting not work. So hopefully I've convinced you this is worth listening to, and we'll go through the what, the why, and the how. So starting with what they are, why they're important, and how to track. From the very beginning, what are macros? Macros are just short for macronutrients, which are the nutrients that we eat in large quantities, as opposed to micronutrients, which are the nutrients we eat in small quantities, like, say, vitamin D and iron, things like that. So all food is made up of one or more macronutrients, and they are carbohydrates, protein, and fats. Now, there is a fourth macro, and that's alcohol. But as that obviously holds no nutritional value, as much as some of us might like to believe it does, I'm not going to go into alcohol today. I'm just going to go into protein, carbs, and fats. I want to start out quickly just with the different functions, because they all have different functions and different roles in our body. So with protein, that is primarily for structure and function in the body. So most of us will know it's used to make muscles, but it's also used to make tendons and enzymes and antibodies, and it's important in the running of our immune system too. Carbohydrates are our body's preferred and primary fuel source. They're primarily used as a fuel source. They're used in large amounts by the brain and muscle tissue, as well as many of our organs. And then fats are also a source of fuel, but then they're the main, this probably comes as no surprise, fats are the main form of energy storage in our body. Fats are also important for proper hormone function. So macros, so we've got the three main macros, they all have a calorie content. So protein and carbohydrates have 4 calories per gram, fats has 9 calories a gram, and alcohol has 7 calories per gram. So now we know what macros are. So what do we mean by macro counting or macro tracking? How do we then track, and why would we track our macros? So just put very simply, macro tracking is a way to account for the food that you consume in a day by counting how many of each macronutrient, mouthful, you're consuming each day. So it's similar to calorie counting. If any of you have ever counted calories, it's similar to that, but it is far superior because of how closely you can customize it for your needs. So in order to work out your macro, you start with your calories. So we want to work out how many calories you expend each day. We need to start with that. Now, this is a ballpark. It's not a very precise, it's not an exact figure, but it does give us a good starting point. Now, we work out the calories that you consume in a day based on a number of factors. They are your age, your weight, your height, your gender, and your activity level. I'm going to show you in a moment a calorie calculator, an online one that you can use to very simply work out your approximate calorie expenditure for the day. And from that, you can work out whether your goal is, well, you want to know whether obviously your goal is to maintain your current weight, to lose body fat, or to put on muscle. Now, obviously, you could also put on body fat, you could also lose muscle, but most people don't have those two as goals. So the main goals people normally have would be maintain weight, lose body fat, or put on muscle. Now, that determines whether your calories will then be maintenance, so to maintain weight, obviously you want maintenance calories. So basically you want to eat the same amount as you would expend in a day. To lose weight, you need to be in a calorie deficit. So you want to bring in less calories, eat fewer calories than you would expend in a day. And to put on muscle, you'd need to be in a calorie surplus. So eating more calories than you expend in a day. So you could just stop there. So if you were counting calories alone, that's all you'd work out. You'd be like, this is how many calories I expend in a day. I want to lose weight or I want to put on muscle. So therefore, I'm going to work out my calories based off of that. Because calories are king when it comes to weight loss. But if you want to ensure optimal body composition and your health and your energy, that is where macros come into play. This is where they come into their own. So if calories are king, protein is queen. So I am going to touch a little bit on carbs and fats and what their role is and how to work those out, but I really want to focus on protein mostly because it's the most important macro when it comes to any of these things. When it comes to muscle, when it comes to fat loss, when it comes to energy levels, cravings, all of these things, protein is the one that is really going to make the biggest difference. So if we track macros and not just calories, what we can do is we can ensure that we're getting enough protein if you're in a deficit to maintain muscle or to build muscle if you're in a calorie surplus. So not only is protein crucial in the growth and repair of muscles, it's probably the thing we know it for most. It is also, it's very crucial if you're training. It's also important for your hair, your skin, your nails, anything that grows really. But apart from that, apart from those things, it also has the highest what's called thermic effect of food, or TEF for short. What that means is it requires more calories to digest and use protein than it does carbohydrates and fats. So in essence, it boosts your metabolism slightly. I don't like using that term too much, but it uses more calories to just digest protein than it does the other macronutrients. It's also, protein is also the most satiating, the most filling of any of the macronutrients, which is important if you're in a deficit, for example, because if you're starving, it's going to be very hard to stick to it. So you want to feel that fullness. It allows you to feel more satiated when you're in a calorie deficit, and it also helps with cravings and things like that. The other important thing to note, and I do talk about this a lot, is that most women do not, if they're not tracking this, don't get enough protein just in their day-to-day diets. And I'll talk about that in a moment, exactly how much you need and how we work that out. When it comes to protein, this is where to get the pen and paper out and take notes. An optimal amount of protein okay, let's backtrack a second. If you look at a sufficient amount of protein, what is the bare minimum that you need to not get protein deficiency? That's about 0.8 grams per kilo of your body weight. So that's to avoid protein deficiency. But we want to do better than avoid protein deficiency. We want to actually get an optimal amount for building tissues, building muscle, for healthy hormones, for our immune system. And that amount is about 1.6 grams to 2.2 grams, a bit of a range, per kilo of body weight. Or if you've got some body weight to lose, then it's per kilo of goal body weight. I'm going to give you a real life example of this in a moment, so don't worry too much if I'm throwing a lot of numbers at you at the moment. But I just want to go through this. So a woman who is strength training, which all of you are, with a body weight or a goal body weight, let's say, of 60 kilograms, is aiming for 96 to 132 grams of protein per day. Just to clarify really quickly, that doesn't mean that you've eaten 130 grams of chicken, that's your protein requirement for the day. It means 132 grams of protein, just pure protein from your food. So for example, an egg has about 7 grams of protein. A chicken breast has about 25 grams of protein for 100 grams. High protein yogurt has 15 to 17 grams. So we've got to look at the overall protein intake for our whole day. I'm going to just share with you quickly a protein cheat sheet. This is in our Google Drive. So I'm just going to share my screen with you and show you this because this is helpful. If you start tracking your protein I have no idea how much protein's in food. Hopefully you guys can see this. So this is just an example of which foods have 30 grams of protein. And if we're looking at, so just to use that example again, just say my goal is 120 grams of protein per day. So I want to get 4 of these serves of food. Obviously, these are not the only foods with protein, but for example, 4 lots of 30 grams is going to get me to 120 grams. So a few examples here. And FYI, you can see that they are listed somewhat, or they list their calories in there too. The reason for that is obviously all foods have calories. And some proteins give you more bang for your buck, I like to say, for protein for calories. So for example, 200 grams of prawns is only 131 calories, but 30 grams of protein. 120 grams of chicken, 133 calories for 30 grams of protein. If you were trying to get all your protein or your 30 grams of protein from cashews, 150 grams of cashews would still give you 30 grams of protein, but you're going to spend 800 calories, 833 calories to get them. So not great bang for your buck from protein. Yes, it's got protein in it, but it also has a lot of fat in it too. So there's lots of calories in cashews. So that just gives you a really good example of how to get 30 grams of protein and what the calorie expenditure is for that 30 grams of protein. So hopefully that made sense to you guys. All right, so moving on. I want to give you, at the moment, I was talking about the example here of the calorie calculator. Let's switch to that first. So I'm going to share my screen. So this is how you would work out your calorie maintenance and calorie expenditure. Expenditure is an approximation, but how you would work out your deficit, if that's the goal. So I'm going to go to this calorie calculator here. So I'm just going to go back and show you how I work this out. So you can see here, I'm going to put in age, female, use myself as example, 163 centimeters. So I'm putting age, gender, height, weight, moderate exercise. So the options for activity are sedentary, light, moderate, active, very active, extra active. I always recommend erring on the side of less than more, because the more activity you put in, the more calories it's going to give you. So if you want to be in a calorie deficit, aka lose body fat, then you'd err on less than more. So let's just put in moderate for this example. Calculate here. So to maintain weight, you can see here, it gives me 1769 calories. Mild weight loss, 1519, weight loss, 1269, extreme weight loss. Definitely don't recommend the extreme weight loss. You'll be very hungry, but that gives you an example of all of those situations. So if I now go from that, so let me just stop sharing that for a second. So obviously you can plug in your own stuff in there, and instead I'm going to share that example that I prepared earlier. So here we've got the information I just plugged into that calorie calculator. Woman 46, 163, 58, moderately active, goals fat loss. We're going to go for the mild calorie deficit, just so maintain some energy, not too super hungry. It's not too severe of a deficit. So your calories, 1500, and we were talking about the protein goals before there. So protein wants to be 1.6 to 2.2 grams per kilogram of body weight. Now this 131, I've just put it at the upper end. It's not an exact, I haven't worked it out exactly, but I went, 60 times 2.2 would be 132 grams. So let's say at the upper end, 131 grams of protein. Then from there, so the first thing you want to work out is your protein. From there, you get to decide, you know how I was talking about carbs and fats earlier. Carbs and fats are your fuel source. It makes no difference in terms of fat loss whether you go to higher carbs, lower fat, higher carbs. There's been numerous studies done on this topic, and time after time they find that there is no difference when calories and protein are equated, whether you go high carb, low fat, high carb, etc. It's going to work out the same. So the great thing about that is you get to decide whether you prefer more carbs, less fat, more fats, less carbs, and you can work out the others from there. So I could have gone lower carbs. Now, if you put this in a calorie calculator like MyFitnessPal, this will make more sense how I got these numbers. So I could have gone higher fats, lower carbs if I'd worked out a different percentage, but I've just worked out this one just for preference. The only thing to note on this is when it comes to fats, there is a minimum. You don't want to go below about 0.7 grams per kilo of body weight. So if it's a 60 kilogram woman, 0.7 times 60 is 42. So you wouldn't want to go lower than 42 grams of fat, just because for optimal hormone health, that's about the minimum. So I err on a little bit higher on the fats, not the bare minimum, and then not too super high on the carbs. So let me know if there's any questions off of that. If you've used something like MyFitnessPal before, then this will make sense to you. If not, you might be wondering how I got those numbers, but essentially I've taken 1500. The calorie calculators will then work out like the distribution of the carbs and fats for you once you've worked out the protein. So you work out the calories, Then you work out the protein based on that 1.6 to 2.2, and then you can split the remaining calories between your carbs and your fats. And altogether, those three numbers, 131 plus 131, there's 4 grams. Remember we worked out earlier, 4 calories per gram. What did I write there? 4 calories per gram. Carbs are 4 calories per gram. And fats are 9 calories per gram. If you added those up, if I went 50 times 9, I'm just going to do the maths on here for you so it makes sense. 131, so let's do 131 times 4. Should have prepared this earlier, shouldn't I? That's about 524, I believe, 524. And that's also going to be 524. Add all those up, you're going to get to this 1500. So that's the macros make up the calories. So 524 plus 450, it's almost bang on 1500. Hopefully that example made sense to you in terms of working out the calories, then the protein, and then you get to decide carbs and fats based on your personal preference. So we've got the protein. Now we get to work out the carbs and the fats based on what I've just said. Then we've done the what and the why. Then it comes to actually tracking your food. Now, I'm not going to go into heaps of depth on this because the best way to get good at tracking your food is to track your food, is to just practice it like anything else. So I use MyFitnessPal. I just find it's pretty user-friendly. There's lots of entries in it, but it's not the be-all. It's not the only one you can use. There's lots of different macro tracking apps that you can use. In MyFitnessPal, you definitely want to go in it and set your own personal goals based off of those calculations that I just told you, because what MyFitnessPal does is its kind of default is to do 50% carbs, I think like 15 or 20% protein, really low, and then the rest fats. And we, like I said, want to switch it around, make sure we're getting enough protein. So you definitely have to go in and put your own personal goals in there, but you can do that with the free version. It's very easy. So the next step, like I said, is just to start doing it, because everyone's going to suck at it at first. When I first started doing it, I was like, how do I even figure this out? I can't get enough protein. My macros never add up. I'm always going over on fats and under on protein, etc., etc. I can't get it to work out. It's practice. It's just doing it over and over, practicing it until you get really good at it. And then, you get good at it. You don't have to do it for the rest of your life, but you've got those tools and those skills and you know how to do it so that if you need to or you want to, you can. The main things to be successful with tracking, I'm going to go through is 3 things. The first part is pretty obvious. It's like anything. You've got to be consistent. So when I say consistent, I mean track every day. Track everything you eat, drinks, log everything, not just the good days, not just the highlights. Track everything. So you get a really good idea of what you're eating day in, day out, and where you need to adjust. You just be completely honest with it, track everything, and then you can work out what you need to adjust. The second thing you need to do to be successful at macro tracking is be precise. So this is where I see most people struggle or fall down, is that they guesstimate too much. They look at something and go, that looks like about 100 grams of chicken, but they have no idea. So weighing your food is really important. Might seem like a pain in the bum to begin with, but the only way you can get good at it is to just be precise about it. And then over time, like you have to earn the right to start to guesstimate things. But in the beginning, no one is good at guesstimating food. There's some pretty good studies around that show when people estimate their calories or estimate their portion sizes, they underestimate by 20 to 30% minimum. So very important to be as precise as you can. I always say to people, wherever you can, weigh your food, weigh your portions, weigh your chicken, your cereal, your butter, your oils, all of those things, weigh them so you can put into the app the amount in grams that you're eating, not half a cup, not approximately this, approximately that. There are certain things that you don't have to worry about being precise about because they're negligible in terms of calories. That would be like herbs and spices. I never bother tracking those. Salt and pepper, of course, you're not going to track those. They've got no calories. Black coffee, don't track that. Black tea, like things that don't have any calories in them, leave them out. Doesn't matter. Things like vegetables, if they're non-starchy vegetables that are really low in calories, like celery and carrot and lettuce and cucumber and tomatoes, etc. I do track those because I want to know my fiber, but I don't necessarily weigh them. It's okay to estimate those things that are so low in calories where 100 grams or 200 grams makes 5 calories difference. Don't worry too much about that. So you don't have to track every little thing down to a T, but most of the big stuff you do. So the carbs and the protein and the fats. So your meats, your dairy, your starchy veggies, certainly your rice, pasta, bread, all those things definitely makes a difference to weigh it or not. So being precise is important. And then the third very important thing, no surprise again, is to be persistent. So the other place I see people give up or fall down and say this doesn't work is they do it for a week or two and go, I didn't lose any weight, so therefore it doesn't work. You need to track for a good 4 weeks to get a really good idea of your behaviors and your habits, and to get enough data to make adjustments, because you might just say you're consistent and you're precise as hell for 4 weeks. You track everything. And at the end of that 4 weeks, you've lost 0 grams. That just tells us you've eaten in maintenance for that, which is good data. It just means that we know, okay, now we know your maintenance calories are exactly this. Even though the calculator said this, they might be slightly off. So we know your maintenance calories are this. If after 4 weeks of tracking and being precise and consistent, you are losing weight and things are going along well, you go, great, I'm in a calorie deficit. If after 4 weeks of tracking, you're gaining weight steadily, you go, okay, I know I'm in a surplus. The good thing about that data is then you can make adjustments, but without getting 4 weeks of solid data, you can't actually adjust anything. You don't know what's going on. And if you haven't been precise and you haven't been consistent, you certainly can't adjust anything. So 4 weeks of solid tracking of being consistent. Now, you might be thinking, I know what you're thinking. I know what some of you are thinking. That sounds like a lot of work to track everything I eat for 4 weeks. But I know a lot of women, maybe you're one, who have struggled for months, if not years, of trying to figure out why they can't lose weight, or why they have cravings all the time, or why they have no energy, or why they're losing muscle, why they can't figure out why those things are. Yes, I'm not, probably, maybe some of you are in the same boat where you're just like, shit, nothing's working. I can't figure it out. I'm eating less, I'm exercising more, but nothing's changing. If you track your calories, track your macros, you've got data to go by. So you can go, okay, I know that if I eat this much, I'm going to maintain weight. So therefore I need to create a calorie deficit to lose weight, or vice versa. If you're trying to put on muscle, then you need to eat more protein and more calories in order to put on muscle. So it just gives you that data to make those decisions off the back of it. And these skills, honestly, you will never lose them. This is something that you will have to be able to use for the rest of your life. Whether you decide to track your macros forever, you don't have to, but it's a very, very educationally important thing to do for a certain period of time. If you want to have control over your nutrition and to be able to optimize your nutrition for your goals. It means that you don't have to jump from one fad diet to the next, or cut out food groups, or throw spaghetti at the wall to try to figure out, oh, maybe this is what I need to do. Maybe that's what I need to do. Tracking macros works if you do it the way I was just explaining. Personally, like just from my own point of view, I've tracked macros on and off for a decade. I started doing it because when I was in my late 30s, I entered a fitness competition, and that's how I learned to track macros, to track my protein, how important protein was. You learn to manipulate it for your goals. And if you do it long enough, you don't have to do it anymore if you don't want to, because you get really good then at estimating and knowing how much protein you need and what foods you need to eat to meet those goals. And then whenever you have a specific goal, you can go back to doing it if you want to. For example, the year before last, I did a boxing fight, many of you will know. And then in boxing, you have to make a certain weight. And I found out 4 weeks before the boxing fight, the weight that I had to make was 3 kilos less than I was. So I had to lose 3 kilos in 4 weeks. And I was also training a lot in that time. So I didn't want to be low in energy and have no energy to train and get punched in the face and knocked out. So I was able to manipulate my macros and my calories. So I knew exactly how many calories to eat and how much protein I needed to eat to maintain my muscle for that 4-week period to lose the 3 kilos, to just have that preciseness and control over the nutrition to be able to manipulate it to your goals. And macros is the way I do all of that. It is very, very empowering to be able to manipulate your nutrition to achieve your goals and not have to guess, basically. So that is, it's like I'm selling macros, aren't I? There's nothing to sell here, except I'm just very bought into it as a very effective method of whatever your goals are, whether it's losing fat, building muscle, having more energy, like ditching the cravings, all of those things, macros is the solution to it. Thanks for jumping on tonight, everybody. I'll see you guys all soon.